Every year, we get a new crop of shooters competing with each other for some mythical three-point crown. And while it might not help us decide who's the best shooter, I can get a good feel for their mechanics up close and personal. So here are some key details I observed from some of the most accurate three-point makers we have this season. First up is Desmond Bane, who's quickly established himself as an elite shooter with most definitely the biggest arms in the competition. I would almost think that because he's so big in his shoulders, it would be hard for him to be an elite shooter, but here's what I noticed. His shooting hand is on the side of the ball for most of the shot. Only when he gets to just before the set point does he rotate the wrist to get the hand underneath the ball. This is actually common for a lot of shooters, and there is no need to try and force the wrist or the elbow under the ball any earlier than what is comfortable. Also notice how his wrist is in a neutral position, and as the arm starts swinging up, it almost flexes before finally extending backwards just before getting to his set point. He's got good rhythm, and what I mean by that is that he syncs his arm swing to the triple extension of his legs well. He starts bending down before the arms begin swinging up. The triple extension of his ankles, knees, and hips occur as the ball is getting to shoulder height. Sometimes you'll see out-of-rhythm shooters lift their arms too early where they haven't begun to straighten their legs until the ball is to the set point. But Bane clearly is already straightening his legs by the time the ball is right in front of his eye, and then it's up and out. They had 2 extra long balls worth 3 points, and you can see how Bane utilizes a dip to get more power into the shot. The downward motion to the waist and quick springy dip back up is the source of the power for the shot, and it clearly helped him here. Being locked in the entire time is crucial to win this competition, so you can't have a foot on a line and lose 2 points like he did here, then skip the Mountain Dew ball initially, realize it after 2 shots on the right wing, and then try to get it back into focus again. Notice how his set point is right around eyebrow ridge, a traditional height, but the ball is also a bit to the side of his head. This can happen when you point your toes directly at the rim. Now let's look at CJ McCollum, who is traditionally around 40% in his career from behind the arc and has one of the smoother strokes in the NBA. The first thing I noticed was that he put the rack on his left side. It's unclear why he wanted to reach across his body for the ball. It would seem to be better to reach from the right side. Another interesting thing about his release is how his right arm will follow through to the right. It doesn't seem to affect how straight the ball flies to the rim, and it could be because he brings the ball up alongside his midline, but wants to bring the ball in front of his dominant right eye by the time of release. Notice in the left corner how he gets a good turn to his left to ensure his shooting hip and elbow are aligned to the hoop. Sometimes coaches will argue that the turn will make shooters miss left. That's not really the case, and CJ demonstrates that with some misses to the right. And the shimmy here is to reset the shoulders, perhaps he's getting tired too, and this time it's closer but 2 inches to the right. Here's a good angle of his toes turned to the left of the center of the basket. He also doesn't need to jump very high and lands just about in the same place he jumps from. Look how late CJ is at rotating his wrist underneath the ball. Again, this is all part of finding a relaxed and comfortable motion. Trying to get your wrist into position underneath the ball any earlier would no doubt be awkward. We got a good shot of CJ's eyes on this release. He follows the ball after it's released, but he tends to do this later than a lot of other ball followers. I decided to line up 2 shots from the same angle, one a make, the other a miss, to see if we can detect anything significant between the 2 shots. If we overlay the 2 shots, the one detail I could detect is that in the make, he gets a little bit higher off the ground. Here's his height on the miss. Now let's overlay the make on top. You can see it's an inch or 2 higher, and that can make all the difference when launching a shot into the air from 25 feet away. In order to appreciate just how good all these guys are, you need to go see them in person. And the best way to do that is by using SeatGeek. Download their app now, and it will scour the internet for the absolute best prices. Give them a grade to let you know if you're getting a great deal, and best of all, if you use my code BBALL, you'll get $20 off your first purchase. So use SeatGeek for tickets to any sporting event, concert, or the theater, and you'll not only have an incredible experience in person, you'll save money on your first purchase with my code BBALL. Luke Kennard is next, and he's been shooting at a career-high clip for the Clippers. The first thing that jumped out at me is his low set point. The ball is completely in front of his face before he goes into the release, and I'm here to tell you that doesn't matter one bit. He knows where the rim is, it ain't moving, and the lower set point provides a better base for power. Back in the day, shooting coaches would freak out about such a low set point, but we've discovered that in the modern game, more of the great shooters shoot it lower. He also gets his feet wider than his shoulders a little bit. Plus, his wrist never really finds extension. It stays close to neutral the whole way into the release. He still has a good floppy wrist snap, it just doesn't have as many degrees of rotation as most players. The lower set point could also help find power, since the wrist provides less of it here. Another thing that raised my eyebrows is how much he bends his elbow. There's almost no space between the forearm and his bicep as he raises the ball to the shot. This is far from a traditional L shape most coaches teach, and I suspect this extra arm bend could be another minor source of power to overcome his lack of wrist extension. I love the floppiness of the wrist snap and how it's timed perfectly with the elbow snap. That elbow straightens all the way, enabling him to find that consistent stroke that has propelled him to the top of the three-point percentage standings on high volume. Being in a positive frame of mind is also important to shooting. You don't want to be overly intense, and Luke shows us a smile at least as he goes into the final rack, which goes very well for him. His toes look to be pointing pretty close to right at the basket, lacking a turn, but when they land, his body does turn slightly. Because he's trying to be square, you can see the ball is along his midline of his body as he swings the arms up into the release. Plus, he jumps forward a foot or two on every jump. Even when he's shaking his head, he keeps his lips in the shape of a smile. I've seen a study that shows faking a smile can really help performance more than having a scowl, and check the result. Let's move on to Zach LaVine, who's so talented, he's competed in the slam dunk contest too. He, like CJ, decided to reach across his body on the first rack, but then went to it on his right for the middle 3 racks before returning to his left on the last rack. I would think you'd want consistency on this, so it was a bit head-scratching. I'm not a fan of his rhythm, when he begins the arm swing up at the same time as he starts to bend his knees down. You can see the ball is at his set point before he's ready to straighten his knees into the jump. I don't think the ball should be that high at this point, and it becomes a 2-motion shot that needs another source of power to get the ball to the rim. On many of his shots, you can see a recoil after the release, where his arm bends immediately after it straightens. A lot of the other shooters would hold this follow through for just a little bit longer, and it made me wonder if this was part of what threw him off in the first round. For instance, on this Moneyball shot, he holds it better, perhaps because he knows it's the last shot of the rack and the ball drops right in. Notice how his hand is on the side of the ball throughout the shot and is still biased to the side through the set point. Just as the wrist begins to flex, the hand gets completely under and behind the ball. The strong snap gets good backwards rotation on the ball, which is vital to keeping the shot straight. Also notice how he gains momentum after retrieving a ball from the rack. He rises up out of his stance so that he can then aggressively sink down into his knee bend. It almost serves as a pause where he can get his focus on the rim and then enable him to spring down and up into the shot in a very athletic way. Here you can see Zach has a good turn with both feet parallel and pointing to his left to allow the right hip and right elbow to get aligned better with the hoop. Patty Mills made his debut in the three-point contest, having nailed 42% of his threes this year for the Nets. He's also one of the only guys I know who's made it to the NBA from Australia with pretty shooting form. Remember how Zach LaVine didn't hold his follow-through? Check Mills with the picture-perfect release, and that arm stays there, just a little longer to ensure proper alignment and form. His rhythm is pretty good. As he begins the knee bend before the arm swing up into the shot, the ball is at his chin as his knees begin to straighten, so the ball can pass right through the set point quickly without losing much energy before going up and out into the release. Check the dip he utilizes for the deep ball, where he needs every ounce of energy and power to get the ball to the basket without using his arms to propel it, which could cause a lot of misses. We get a nice view of Patty's turn to the left with his toes pointing to about 10 o'clock. This is perfect to get that shooting hip and elbow in line with the basket. Mills has a pretty low set point as well, right in front of his cheek, which obscures his view of the basket for a split second, but that doesn't affect his accuracy. There's better energy transfer with a lower set point than a higher one. Patty jumps kinda high on his shot, which can tire him out by the end, but this is a textbook sway of his legs in front of him, hinging at the waist to allow the shoulders to stay back and comfortable and let the arms simply be in charge of keeping that ball straight. It's not easy to see here, but it looks to me like Mills follows the ball with his eyes right upon release, another trait that many of the great shooters of all time had. Let's turn to Karl-Anthony Towns, who was basically the first center to compete in this contest, and perhaps because there was no pressure on him, the guy who won the whole damn thing. This kind of competition is perfect for his 2-motion shot, where he doesn't even have to jump off the floor to shoot it. As a result, he didn't get tired by the final rack. His release point is also the classic height just above the eyebrow, and his rhythm is how they used to teach shooting. Lift your arms up at the same time as the knees are bending down. This isn't how the best shooters do it, but there are a lot of factors involved, especially when you're 7 feet tall, that can let you have less optimal energy transfer but still make a ton of shots. You can see by his feet how much he turns to get proper alignment, and that he doesn't get off the ground hardly at all. I'm fairly certain he doesn't jump that low in games, but with no defense and lots of time to get these off, it works great for him here. Here's a great shot of his late wrist extension. We can see that it's neutral till right about here. And part of the built-in rhythm is how the wrist will extend back and then flex forward pretty quickly. That is the kind of flow that allows for a nice release. We got a nice shot of his eyes on this shot, and he appears to be focusing solely on the rim without gazing up at the flight of the ball. Fred VanVleet has shot the 3-ball well his whole career, and I gotta tell ya, it's a little surprising to me after seeing how dramatic the sideways spin on the ball is. With the multicolored ball, it's extremely clear how his ball spins, and here's the reason why. His offhand is imparting a ton of influence. It's usually not a big deal if the offhand thumb pushes on the ball during the shot. A lot of great shooters do this, but VanVleet's left wrist also pronates into the shot while his arms come together and the left thumb actually touches the inside of his right arm. I am a little concerned by these mechanics, and I'm scratching my head a little bit that he's been able to get these to go in at such a high rate. But it's just more proof that there are ways to make shots that don't fall under the accepted practice category. And that brings us to Trae Young, who has the lowest set point of anybody at the competition, with the bottom of the ball even with his chin. And check the offhand. His thumb does push on the ball slightly, and then he brings the whole hand back to the right in what feels to be an awkward motion. There's the thumb push, then a couple of frames for the right hand to finish flexing into the release, and then the left hand moves back towards the right hand. His rhythm is pretty good. The knees start bending before the arms swing up, but with his low set point, he gets to the release point even quicker. As a result, the release is hyper quick, one motion, as the ball doesn't pause at all once he starts bringing it up into the shot. Young also doesn't need to jump that high because his rhythm and low set point generate plenty of power from anywhere inside 40 feet. In the end, Cat started out really hot, racking up 22 points after the second Mountain Dew shot. Both Trae and Luke could only get 14 by then, so no amount of hot shooting could make up for the insurmountable lead Towns had, as he gets bragging rights as the best shooting big man for this year. But something tells me we're going to see a lot more 7-footers enter in this competition in the future and put some of these sharp shooting little guys to shame.